Hey my red velvet cookies, welcome to this video. So this video will be much more focused in terms of the actual revision studying aspect of A levels, but I do have a guide to sixth form or starting in year 12 which I will link up, and I would really recommend watching that, and that is much more about your everyday life in sixth form and advice for that, and hopefully will help you stress out a little bit less if you're in year 12 going into sixth form or college now. So this video was stuff that I was told that I'm really glad I did, or things that I wished I knew earlier starting year 12. And for A levels I got an A-star in biology and geography and then an A in chemistry, so I do understand what it's like taking STEM and also humanities subjects, and these tips can be applied to all of them. So in no particular order really, but take topic tests seriously. I know that they're goofy and it's like, oh, there's no point revising, and if something comes up and you don't have the energy to revise and you just really easily can neglect them. But I'm telling you, if you take topic tests seriously, it makes a difference so much, because it's like you firstly have already understood the content before, you made resources, and you have done question practice for it, and so the more that you take your topic test seriously, the easier it will be when you do your final exams or your A levels or your mocks, even your year 12 mocks. You'll find it so much easier to prepare. So please take your topic test seriously. And also for tests, you can plan backwards based on how confident you feel with the content. So I would really recommend doing that rather than assuming that you can get everything done in 2 nights and then you can't, So if you're really not confident in an exam, in this topic, plan backwards. Maybe you need a week to revise for it, and you can do okay, first 2 nights I'm going to go over the content, watch some videos, understand what is going on, and then you can start doing some question practice. Maybe you could give an essay to a teacher, get feedback, and then build up for that test. And then you still have those resources for when you do a more serious one as well. Also, when it comes to revising, I would really prioritise doing questions if you are doing STEM subjects. So for me, biology, chemistry, I found that to be really, really useful, rather than although doing flashcards and blurting were useful for learning the content, ultimately your exam is just made up of questions, right? So the more questions you do, the more familiar you are with this style of questions and the mark schemes. That is so much better than learning all the content via flashcards, but then you can't actually pick up the marks, because it doesn't really matter how well you understand a concept if you can't apply it, or if you can't word it in a way that answers a question, which sucks. But unfortunately that's how exams work, especially STEM. So doing questions, a lot of the times questions repeat, right? Questions basically have the same mark scheme, but they use different contexts, they use different examples that you have to apply to. So the more questions that you do, the more familiar you are with the points that it's trying to make you write down. So if you repeat questions, then you just kind of intuitively pick up on the sort of stuff that you're meant to say, and the keywords that you're meant to use as well, so you can strategically get all the marks. Also, before exams, I would really recommend understanding the content, fully understanding the whole process, right? And you could do flowcharts to help you understand, diagrams. Biology is a lot more helpful with more visual subjects, but understanding the content, or for geography, say for example, or maybe history as well, understand the events that led up to this moment, understand the players involved, their motives, their reasonings, the context behind it as well. If you understand things, it's so much more easier to memorize them. And A levels and exams are kind of also a memory game too. If you have a good ability to memorize stuff, then that will obviously benefit you. So understanding things will make it so much more easier to memorize it and have it in your long-term memory afterwards. With that, making resources, flashcards, do them as early as possible. So I'm not going to be that person that's you need to do it after every lesson, because I tried that in September year 12, and then after that I just did not do that again. Like, I was on a roll at the start and then I kind of flopped. But I would recommend, so what I did was I would make like the whole deck of flashcards after each topic, and I felt like that was quite good because you basically, you sit down, you start typing, locking in, and you just get into the flow like state, and you do like the deep work, and you can basically just like pump out a deck of flashcards, and it feels really satisfying to have that to look on afterwards. So I would recommend doing flashcards at least after every topic. You could maybe do after every week if you had that motivation, but it's just the easier you do it, the less it piles up. And you want to be making your resources at a time where you understand the whole topic, right? You don't want to be waiting like a few months, you come back and you realize that you don't really know what's going on, and so you're making these resources but you don't have that understanding. So make them when the content and the stuff like related to it is still fresh in your head. Also, the way that I made flashcards was you can check out my Notion video. So I basically made my flashcards on Notion as notes, but instead of like subheadings, it would be a toggle. So I could like reveal the answer. So it was like a flashcard, but then it was also all my notes there. So I could also just go back and quickly find a certain like point in the spec if I needed to. And so this links to me talking about how important it is to do questions, but on Anki, which is an app that I'd really recommend, it's kind of ugly, but it does the job. But anyway, for biology and chemistry and like STEM subjects, I wouldn't put content and like my notes on the flashcard. I would put questions on the flashcard with their mark schemes as the answer. And I feel like I've not seen people really do that, but I would really recommend doing that. And I was like quite proud of myself for like coming up with that, just because then it's like you're doing regular questions, and in STEM, questions are what matter pretty much, because you could absolutely understand the entire content, but there will be a very high probability that you still will not be able to pick up all the marks, just because of the way that you need to word questions and the way that you need to answer them. So for STEM on Anki, I did questions. For geography, I did have the content, so I would memorize all the stuff from the spec. And I would really recommend like printing out the spec, and so when you're making flashcards, notes, whatever, you can tick off the topics when you've done them and make sure that you've covered everything, and also making sure that you're not doing too much and that you're not learning stuff that you don't need to. Because I think in lessons, at least for my school, like there would be lessons where there wasn't anything on the spec but it was related, and it could kind of help you understand the topic in like a broader context, but you didn't need to learn it, and like you definitely didn't need to know the specifics of it. So the spec, really important as well, because that is exactly what you would be tested on. Also, Anki is really good, I forgot to say, because it implements spaced repetition. And so in studying, like they're like, I feel like the pillars of studying, and if you know how to do these two and you implement them into your like study daily routine, you will go so far, is active recall, which is what you get from flashcards and like doing questions, and also spaced repetition. Because I'm sure you've like experienced when you understand something, you know it, the next day you could probably recite it, but then a week later you've just forgotten everything. So spaced repetition keeps you engaged in like learning and like memorizing and remembering content, so that it's not going to leave your long-term memory, and that you can like pull it out, extract it as like quickly, easily as possible during the actual exam. So take Anki seriously, I think, is one of my biggest tips if you're using it, because, or like keep on top of your flashcards, because you will get such a massive backlog if you don't do anything. Like I didn't do Anki for a few months, I think. Yeah, like the start of year 13. I didn't do Anki for a while, and I at one point had 1,000 overdue cards, and it's so demotivating. And this is like onto my next point, but try to break things down into smaller chunks to do, or like break down goals into smaller things that are achievable, because otherwise you could feel so overwhelmed and then you're just paralyzed to start, right? So say me seeing 1,000 overdue Anki cards, that I don't want to touch that. I don't want to go near that, because it's like, what the heck? So breaking it down, if I were like, okay, every day if I can get like 50 cards done, then that's still something, you know, and then eventually you will manage to stay on top of it. So you can do that in terms of like if you've got a massive topic and you're like, I don't want to make flashcards for it, you can break it down and do a couple each day. Or if you've got a test coming up and you're really worried about it, break it down as well. Say one day I'll do this, another day I'll do this, another day I'll do this, and then work backwards as well so that you've got plenty of time, you're not stressing. Also, having an organization system. So revision isn't just about that like time when you're sitting down revising, right? It's also about the things leading up to it and your environment. So making sure that your desk isn't cluttered, making sure you know where you can find your resources, you know where you've put your flashcards, your notes, your question booklets, stuff like that, so that you're in this like more organized state of mind, and then that makes it so much easier to revise and like actually learn things and then file them away in your own like mental space. Also, start brainwashing yourself as early as possible to get into a consistent studying routine. And I think this is so important because something that I've really realised for A-levels is that consistency is the most important thing. Like for GCSEs, you could be like naturally smart at a subject and you could cram the night before, get away with it. A-levels, you absolutely cannot cram beyond a certain extent. But it's like you shouldn't be cramming anyway for A-levels. And it's so much more content that consistency is always so much more important and like will win over intensity. So try and get into the habit of doing, I would recommend 2 hours. I did 2 hours from like 7 till 9 pretty much every night. I would really recommend that. But 3 hours if you're like pushing it. But I'm talking about actual work, not like you're working for 20 minutes, you check your phone for a little bit. Like I'm talking about like you're actually working for that time, and like obviously with like 5-10 minute break in between, get a cup of tea, but you basically have just worked for like 2 hours. And I would do homework in that time, I would do like my NEA, I would do my EPQ, I would also revise, make resources, go over flashcards, and it was enough time for me. I mean, okay, I got an A in chemistry, so maybe it wasn't, I did kind of slack off the last few months of year 13 just because of like personal issues and stuff. But I think if you, and 2 hours is manageable, it's not scary, right? So it's about doing that and trying to do that consistently, and then using the rest of the time to do extracurriculars, to hang out with friends, to do extra reading, and to brainwash yourself. I would really recommend, and I will do like a how to do a study routine because someone asked me that, but I would really recommend something called habit stacking, which is this idea that it's really difficult to just start a habit out of thin air, but if you attach it to a habit that you already have, it makes it a lot easier. And so say for example, when you come home from school, you get changed into like more comfortable clothes, you have a snack, and then after the snack you then pair that with, then I sit down at my desk and start revising. And also pairing it with stimuli. So for me, in the winter, I would light a candlestick, and that would like signal to my brain time to revise. And you know, turning off your phone, putting it on do not disturb, put it in a different room to minimize distraction. And lastly, please look after your mental health. Please have a list of like hobbies, things that you can do to take your mind off things when like it gets a bit overwhelming sometimes, because I feel like year 12, year 13, the intensity of it is much more than GCSE or the year before if you're in year 13. So your mental health will probably be likely to take a hit at some point. That's completely normal, completely understandable, like completely human. So making sure that you have things that you can do to feel better, to de-stress, and then keep yourself sane. Remember to do some exercise and be active, go out in nature on hikes and walks, take breaks 100%. like do not overwork yourself. Breaks are essential, okay? Implement that into your study routine too. Have sweet little treats, that's my favorite thing. Bake sweet little treats maybe. For me, I really like doing reading, gardening, baking, hanging out with friends, walks, stuff like that, and that is how I managed to get through sixth form. So I hope that you found this video useful. I hope that you are having a great day as well, and that you absolutely thrive in sixth form, whether that's year 12, year 13. I hope that the tips were useful today, and have a great day. Love you.